It was supposed to be a joyful moment. Luna, a loving German shepherd, had finally given birth after weeks of anticipation. Her owner, David, watched with tears in his eyes as tiny newborns squirmed beside her. But within minutes, that joy turned to confusion. The newborns didn't look right. Too pale, too small, their cries strangely soft. Luna growled protectively when the vet tried to examine them. Everyone in the room froze as the doctor's smile faded. Her hands trembled, eyes widening in disbelief. "These aren't puppies," she whispered. What Luna had given birth to would shock everyone and change everything. Inside the small farmhouse, David sat anxiously beside his German shepherd, Luna, who was lying on a blanket near the warm glow of the fireplace. Her breathing was heavy, her eyes wide with pain and determination. "Easy, girl," David whispered, stroking her head gently. "You're almost there." He had been waiting for this moment for weeks. The night Luna would bring new life into their quiet home. Lightning flashed through the window as the first contraction hit. Luna whimpered softly, pressing her paws against the blanket. David's hands shook as he grabbed his phone and called Dr. Harris, the local veterinarian. Within minutes, headlights cut through the rain outside, and the door swung open. "She's in labor?" Dr. Harris asked quickly. David nodded, voice trembling. "It's happening now." The vet knelt beside Luna, murmuring soothingly as she helped her through the delivery. Then, one after another, the tiny newborns arrived, fragile, silent, and unusually pale. David smiled with relief, until his joy began to fade. The pups didn't cry. Their movements were weak. And for the first time in years, even the doctor looked afraid. Something was wrong. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, but inside the farmhouse, an eerie stillness filled the room. Luna lay exhausted, her breathing shallow, eyes fixed protectively on her litter. David knelt beside her, smiling through tears. "You did it, girl," he whispered, reaching out to touch one of the tiny newborns. But before his hand could reach them, Luna let out a low, warning growl. Her fur bristled as she shifted her body, shielding the babies from everyone, even him. Dr. Harris frowned and adjusted her glasses, her instincts immediately on edge. She leaned closer, careful not to provoke Luna. "David," she murmured, "look at their color." The newborns weren't the soft brown or black typical of German shepherd pups. Their fur was ghostly white, almost translucent, and their paws were too small, too fragile. One of them twitched strangely, its tiny limbs trembling as if reacting to light. David forced a nervous laugh. Maybe it's just because they're newborns. But when one opened its mouth, the sound that came out wasn't a bark. It was a faint, almost human-like whimper. Dr. Harris's face drained of color. "David," she whispered, "these aren't normal puppies." David sat by Luna's side, watching her nurse the newborns. They were quiet, too quiet. Their tiny chests rose and fell, but their movements were strange, almost deliberate. One lifted its head slightly and stared right at him with pale, unfocused eyes. It shouldn't have been possible for a newborn. When Dr. Harris returned, she brought sterile tools and specimen tubes. "I need to take a few samples," she said gently. Luna snarled, forcing David to hold her back. The vet quickly took swabs and clippings, her hands trembling slightly. "Their temperature is off," she murmured, "and their breathing rhythm. This isn't normal." After finishing the tests, she packed her bag inside. "I'll take these to the lab. We should have answers in a day or two." That night, David couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, watching Luna guard the strange newborns. Every time he tried to approach, she growled softly. Yet something even more unsettling caught his eye. One of the babies lifted its paw and clutched his finger with surprising strength. As if recognizing him. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Dr. Harris, her voice tight, shaken. "David," she said, pausing. "You need to listen carefully. Whatever Luna gave birth to, they're not dogs." The line went silent except for the faint crackle of static, and David's heart began to race. That night, David woke to Luna's frantic barking. The blanket where the newborns had been was empty. Panic surged through him. "Luna? Where are they?" he shouted. The dog's growls echoed from the back door. When he turned on the light, he saw muddy paw prints leading outside. But they weren't just Luna's. Luna ran ahead, fur bristling, barking toward the barn. The wind howled through the trees as he swung open the barn door and froze. The newborns were there, huddled together in the hay, their pale fur shimmering faintly under the beam of his flashlight. Their eyes, half open, reflected an unnatural glow. Before David could process what he was seeing, headlights appeared outside. Dr. Harris's car screeched to a stop, and she ran in, clutching a folder. "David, you have to listen to me," she said, breathless. "I just got the lab results. Luna's DNA is normal, but the baby's genetic code isn't. They match specimens from a restricted research facility nearby." David's voice trembled. "You mean?" Her face turned pale. "Luna didn't get pregnant naturally. Someone used her. And those things she gave birth to, they're part of an experiment." The barn was filled with silence, broken only by the soft whimpers of the newborns. David stood frozen, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "What do you mean, an experiment?" Dr. Harris opened the folder, her hands shaking. "These DNA patterns aren't natural. They're part canine, but also contain sequences linked to primate genes, possibly human." Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "There was a biotech lab outside the city that went dark a year ago after a government raid. They were rumored to be testing hybrid embryos on stray animals. Luna must have been one of their victims before you rescued her." David stared at the newborns, his heart breaking. They weren't monsters. They were innocent lives, brought into the world by cruelty. Luna whimpered softly and nudged them closer, her instincts purely maternal despite the horror surrounding her. Dr. Harris pulled out her phone, dialing local authorities. "We need to report this immediately. They'll send an investigation team." Minutes later, red and blue lights flickered outside. Officers surrounded the farmhouse, and a government agent stepped forward. His tone was grave. "Sir, we'll need to take the litter for containment. They're not safe here." David's stomach twisted. "You can't just take them away. They're her babies." The agent met his eyes coldly. "They're not puppies, Mr. Cole. They're evidence." Luna growled low, standing protectively in front of her young. A mother ready to fight the world, Luna spent her days lying by the window, her head resting on her paws, watching the road where the government truck had disappeared. She refused to eat much, refused to play. Every sunset, she'd perk her ears, hoping to hear the faint cries of her babies. But the world had gone silent. David did everything he could to comfort her. "They're safe now," he whispered, kneeling beside her. Dr. Harris said they're being cared for. But deep down, even he didn't believe it. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a memory haunted by the sound of a mother's grief. One afternoon, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Dr. Harris stepped out, carrying a small envelope. Her eyes were red, her expression soft. "David, I wanted to tell you in person," she said quietly. "The hybrids didn't make it. Their bodies couldn't sustain the altered DNA." She paused, taking a shaky breath. But before they passed, they responded to something incredible. When we played a recording of Luna's bark, they turned their heads. They recognized her. David felt tears burn his eyes. He looked back at Luna, whose tail twitched faintly at the mention of her name. "They knew her," he whispered. Dr. Harris nodded. Even science couldn't erase a mother's bond. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Luna rested her head on David's lap, closing her eyes peacefully for the first time in weeks. Outside, the sky glowed gold, a quiet reminder that love, no matter how strange or broken, always finds a way to be remembered.